Alberta municipalities, businesses, public sector unions, and average everyday Albertans are still pondering the recent budget which came out. In studio now to discuss the budget and other things which impact us here in the Windy City is UCP Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf. Nathan, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Now, you're also in Edmonton with a whole bunch of people. Team Lethbridge, tell me a bit about that. What happened there?
Yeah, it's great. Team Lethbridge is a group of organizations, 22, 23. It's continued to grow. They come up to Edmonton to meet with the government and the opposition and just share the successes and stories that we have in Lethbridge and make sure that the government is aware of what we're doing down here.
That's wonderful. Now, let's talk a bit about the budget. You're getting a lot of flack from unions about public sector wage cutbacks. How is this really going to affect our doctors, our nurses, and our teachers here?
It's a significant issue. We have heard a lot about it. At this point, we're still at negotiation, pre-negotiation, and the whole process coming up to arbitration. So there's lots of negotiating that goes on in the public eye. When we talk wage rollbacks, that has been countered or maybe even presupposed by a request for a 5 to 8% increase by the unions. At this point in time of fiscal restraint, we're really projecting a 0% growth. And that's, I think, what we're hoping to land on. But the process will take its place and they will have their day to share their concerns on their side.
Also some concerns as well voiced by university and college staff over reduced budgets. Can you talk to that?
Absolutely. If there was one area that probably saw a little bit more adjustment than most, it was advanced education. So I've been working closely with the boards and administrations of both institutions and trying to still find our way through with that. There's challenges, whether it's removing the cap on tuition, which some students worried. That's a measure of last resort, but it's part of the process. But the bigger part that goes unseen is removing some of the red tape and restrictions on universities for being able to utilize empty buildings, empty space in the private sector and recover huge dollars in terms of rent or collaborative movements with the private sector. So as a whole package, I think there's a way forward, even if there's some challenges in the near future.
Now, one of the concerns being brought up by some residents as well is why the province decided not to build any new schools in our city, even though there's a growing population, schools may be overcrowded.
That's something I continue to advocate for behind closed doors. I know the growth in Lethbridge and have to speak to that to the minister. I think in this case, they picked 25 sites and they have to work with those. But in a bigger picture, what we're working with, not only with Minister of Education, but Minister of Infrastructure, setting up a 20 or 25-year plan for that capital growth, those capital needs, where they can be prioritized, where people can see a few years ahead of time what's coming up next, and hopefully work on evaluating that and planning for that. If we can plan for it, it really takes a lot of pressures off of budgets, the immediate budgets or long-term budgets, where you can see what's coming and know where you are in the queue. Every municipality around the province has got their pressures and concerns and challenges. And though I would love to see a school in Lethbridge, we didn't this time. Maybe that's due to the one being built in the south end right now. But we definitely need one going forward, and I'll be speaking to the minister about that.
Now, the construction of a lot of the new schools includes the P3 method, the public-private partnership model. Can you explain that a little more detail?
Sure. That's a model where we help, we activate the private sector for investment. They work on the whole planning and construction aspect of it to allow the province sort of like a rent-to-own scenario in layman's terms. And that allows us to build a lot more schools while maintaining a budget and getting the infrastructure. So how that's handled is key, but there's a lot of room for innovation. There's a lot of room for the private sector to be involved in these projects and allow us to get needed projects on the road sooner rather than later.
Let's talk about some other potential infrastructure projects, including maybe the potential of a new bridge for Lethbridge.
Well, that's a very interesting model. A lot of people don't know a new bridge with engineering and site surveying, those kind of things, can be upwards of $150 million. It's a significant investment, not to mention the road.
Could it be spread out, however, though?
That could be. It could be spread out with a private investment. I know Vancouver, BC has done similar things with their Port Mann Bridge. They needed to add additional lanes, something very similar to us, and they made that toll. Not a lot of people are happy with that, but that is one option of a user pay to allow for that infrastructure to come in way ahead of the curve.
I live on the west side. I wouldn't be happy about that toll.
That's true.
All the time.
But if it alleviated pressure, if it allowed another option, there's potential for that. So I'm not saying anything's set in stone, But those are ways of getting much needed infrastructure on a much quicker time frame. So we're trying to look at that and think outside the box, be creative, be innovative, and allow for some of those projects maybe to move ahead on an expedited manner.
The opioid crisis continues across many cities in our country, including here in our province, Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, and right here in Lethbridge. The UCP was also talking about potentially not advancing funding beyond March 31st for the safe consumption sites, including the one at Arches. What have you heard?
All I've heard is that we haven't projected next budget. We still have lots of conversations about this one to be had and working out the trajectory for that. I think what we do want to emphasize is that we want to go in a direction of treatment and recovery. Leaving people in a cycle of addiction is not where we want to leave them. We want to move them past that. So there's numerous things that we need in Lethbridge. We've talked about it many times before. Treatment, recovery beds that are on the way. Detox.
The counseling.
Social housing, recovery coaches. Lots of great ideas, lots of great research out there. A lot of it done here in Lethbridge from the University of Lethbridge and some professors on that. We need to have that plan well established, and then we can put funding to it. Without designating that direction, you can spend a lot of dollars and then have to reinvest dollars. We don't want to do that back and forth. We want to have a clear plan in place. I continue to emphasize the dire need that we have in Lethbridge, and having spoken to the Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and the Minister of Justice, inviting them both down again for a second trip to Lethbridge in the very near future so they can see firsthand how we need to tackle it here.
Well, the panel went across the province as well, Nathan, finding out what the average Albertan had to say about it, and a lot of business owners want to shut down entirely these safe consumption sites.
That's true, but that doesn't address the problem. It might fix one, but we still have a population that's going to be displaced. So the human element of that is what do we do there? Again, I am very strongly an advocate about a plan, about a direction. You don't want to shut a door until you've got a window to move to, and so to speak. So we really need that direction. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this population? How are we going to address it? And I absolutely understand those businesses have coming from the private sector, having toured and spent time with those business owners. They have incredibly urgent needs.
Because a lot of these business owners, Nathan, say, we're just enabling right now, handing out the free needles. We don't have the intox, we don't have the detox, the counseling. We're just enabling. More drug dealers are moving into town. You know, we have more drug houses opening up, so.
Significant issues, and very right to be concerned about the impact of their business, the impact to our town. And then we don't want the not in my backyard syndrome, which is what we're going to have if we shut it down without a plan. So what we need to do is say, where are we going? Harm reduction fills part of the spectrum of care, and that is valid. And it does give a lot of these people a chance at another day. So where do we want to go from here? How do we get them into treatment? How do we get them into recovery? How do we get them onto the next step? And how do we address those that, for our best efforts, don't accept those treatments? So there's some significant issues, like you mentioned before, SCAN, getting them down with our police service, supporting our police service and our EMS.
We need a federal prosecutor in town as well.
We need a federal prosecutor, provincial prosecutor. We need access possibly to these drug courts where we're getting these things addressed. That's the most important, I think, is having an answer. Just shuffling them off to another neighborhood, shuffling them off to another area is not resolving the problem, and we want to face that head on.
The province also rolled out a plan to help a lot of the RCMP or a lot of police officers as well when it comes to rural crime. Yeah. So giving peace officers, hundreds of peace officers, more responsibility. Can you talk to that a bit?
I can talk to that. I think that's a lot of rural residents are very happy to hear that, to know that their voice has finally been heard. So they don't have to take the law into their own hands. They are now able to stand up and protect their property that they've put their whole lives into. I think that really matters, as well as supporting our police force, because we know they're stretched thin. They can't be everywhere at once. So enabling them to work together. I know there's the new communication system, trying to coordinate access for the different levels of policing so they're on the same page. So they're truly acting as one force, not multiple forces under different direction. I think there's some significant productive things to be gained by going down that way as well, and including our fire, EMS, and ambulance services as well. they play a significant part in some of that response team to different emergencies, depending what they are.
And many of the EMS people I've talked to, Nathan, they say they're already stretched. Their resources, especially when it comes to the SCS, the supervised consumption site, many people are taking time off right now, long-term disability, because they're burnt out. A lot of them are just stressed out and burnt out right now. But when it comes to the rural areas, what's interesting with Justice Minister Doug Schweitzer was saying that now people, like you said, they can protect their homes and their property without expecting maybe a legal reaction of somebody breaking into your home, threatening you and your family, and then you take a shot, hit them in the leg or the arm, and then they sue you. That's not going to be the case anymore, right?
Exactly, and we're hoping to stop it way before it gets that far. The real intent of this legislation and this direction is to let perpetrators know beforehand, hey, people are prepared and allowed to defend their property. So maybe it'll alleviate some of that pressure. They're not going to be sitting targets at this point. They can address that up front. So it's the deterrence, I think that's the key part of this direction.
Now, what about the fact that the province is taking a larger portion of revenue coming from tickets and fines, which apparently results in less money for the cities to fund a police force? How do you respond to that?
I think there's a lot of factors. Municipalities are faced with some restriction in fundings, but there has been a pattern for 25 years of continually increasing our funding levels, whether it's municipal or provincial. We've taken a very strong step in the direction of curbing that. First budget in 25 years to reduce spending. 25 years, that's a long trajectory. And
that includes other Conservative government.
And it includes many other Conservative governments.
Right.
So this is a big direction change, and it's not comfortable nor easy. And we're not making light of it, and we're not passing the buck. We are expecting every level of government to help us with that. There's efficiencies, there's mandates, there's cooperations, there's collaborations that we need to find. And there are levels where it's uncomfortable. This is not easy. We would all love to get a raise every year. In our personal lives, that just doesn't happen.
2-3%, that's fine, right?
That
Keep
would
up with the cost of inflation?
That would be great. It's not always possible. And what we've done here is a 2.8% reduction, which is very minimal. We could go back to the austere measures in the 93 of 19%, 19% across the board. That was very, very difficult. We're nowhere near that, but we do have to make some corrections. So in perspective, this is a very thoughtful, a very targeted budget. Social services, children's services, not touched. In fact, a lot of increase. Healthcare.
What about seniors? Let's talk about seniors.
Seniors, again, it's been maintained. There are some areas where we've seen some drawback in the sense that we want to target to those who need it most. We have to make sure that seniors who are on a very fixed income and on the low end of that scale are getting the services that they need. So there'll be some income measuring. Some seniors are very, very well off, and we may be asking them to pay a little bit more for some of the services they receive if they're capable of doing so. But again, the intent is to make sure that those who really need it have the services available to them.
How about those who are on long-term disability and using AISH?
So that's a really interesting story. A lot of misinformation about AISH. A lot of people have expected that indexing to go on for years. Indexing has never happened. Never happened in Alberta. Indexing was a measure that was brought forward by the previous government before the election to start January 1, 2020. So we've never had indexing. And at this point, we pay on average $400 a month per person more than the next closest government, next closest jurisdiction. So we do have very, very healthy measures. We want to make sure that we hold the line there while we get our spending sorted out as a province. And that a lot of those people on AISH, if they went to the next closest jurisdiction with indexing in place, it would still take 20 years for them to catch up to the amounts that we pay now. So it's very measured. We're not restricting, we're not cutting. We're just holding the line, and that is challenging in many areas. We don't think it should be adverse in this area.
How about the energy industry? How is the UCP government working with the Trudeau Liberals to try and advance the energy sector, oil and gas? I mean, we heard recently about in Canada, shutting things down in Calgary, moving to Denver, Colorado, Husky Energy, laying off hundreds of people. Nathan, it's still in turmoil.
It is, absolutely. And we have some measures coming up in the next 3-4 weeks, some very exciting announcements. Some of that new drilling will be exempt from some of those fees from curtailment. We're just about through the oil by rail debacle that cost Albertans into the billion of dollars, and some initiatives that will hopefully get some drilling happening again. The key really is a pipeline. So we continue to advocate, continue to work. We do believe that there are some cooperations, some coalitions across many provinces.
Are shovels in the ground now? What's the latest?
I believe that shovels are starting in certain jurisdictions, but again, until that pipeline is connected and oil's flowing, we don't really see the benefit.
What is that going to take? Maybe another couple of years?
I think it's about 2 years. So it's still a long term, but that is where we want the direction to go. And we still stand firmly behind that industry. So we want to alleviate some of the pressures in the short term, but continue to work to that long-term goal to get those resources to market.
What about the Alberta separatist movement? It's gained a lot of momentum, especially since the last federal election. What are you hearing right now in the streets?
For sure. There's a lot of people very, very frustrated. I'm sure you know some, I know some, and we feel those sentiments. They're very real, very powerful, and people want answers. People want answers from a Canadian government that has consistently forgotten the West. So we want to be managing those levels very, very well. We want to make sure that we don't see any further disruption to our economy. There's still a lot of people very proud to wear the maple leaf on their chest. And we want to be as part of Federation for as long as we can, hopefully forever.
As Jason Kenney's already said, he's a federalist. He has no desire to separate, right?
No desire to separate, but we want our voice heard. We need to matter. We've paid into Confederation for many years to the tune of $260 billion. We have contributed. We are innovators, we're leaders, and we want to make sure that that gets recognized. And we'll use every tool in the toolbox to leverage that recognition out of whoever is in government in Ottawa.
Nathan Neudorf, UCP MLA for Lethbridge East. Thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thank you very much for the time.